Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
What's up, friends? Welcome to episode 8. This is an interview with a colleague of mine, Stephanie Hudson. She's a web designer based in North Carolina, and she has a web design agency called Sweet Tea, and she's also a partner in a white label maintenance plan service called Focus WP. And speaking of focus, this episode is all about focusing on your strengths. This was an incredible episode from start to finish because we talk about the power and the benefits of focusing on your strengths and focusing on the type of work and the tasks that you enjoy and that build you up and give you life, opposed to what most designers do for a very long time, particularly for freelancers and solopreneurs, which is to do everything in the business and have to do a lot of tasks that you're either not well suited for, or things that you hate, or things that just bring you down. And if you do that for a long time, you're going to experience burnout, you're going to be worn out, and more importantly, you're going to wake up and not enjoy the work you're doing. And this episode is really all about focusing on the things that give you life, that really help build you up and make it so that you wake up in the morning and you're excited to do some work. And that's what it's all about. So this was a fascinating conversation from start to finish. I think you're going to get so many actionable and tactical and practical things that you can apply right now to your business. And Steph is great. She's just a really great communicator, and she loves people. And you can tell that this was a super passionate subject for her. And it was interesting because we were actually going to do an episode on maintenance plans, which I think we're going to do one here sometime soon on maintenance plans, but she asked about maybe doing an episode based around focusing on your strengths and talking about what success looks like to different people, and that's what we did, and it was awesome. Now, speaking of maintenance plans, this episode is brought to you by my website maintenance plan course. So starting a maintenance plan absolutely changed my life. It changed things for my business. It changed things for my family because it was my first taste at these two lovely words called recurring income. And as soon as I launched my website maintenance plan and I got it off the ground, it really ended the feast and famine for my web design business. And I was so passionate about how it helped me that I created a course off it. So my website maintenance plan course will teach you from start to finish how to create a plan of your own. You can join today, and I would love to help you start building solid recurring income. And it'll be a win-win for you and your clients. If for some reason, though, you don't want to do your own maintenance plan, you'll hear throughout this episode that you can actually connect with Steph and hire her website white label maintenance plan service at Focus WP, and she'll be a great partner for you. So without further ado, guys, enjoy my super engaging and fascinating conversation with Stephanie Hudson, and you guys are going to get some serious value from this one. Enjoy. Steph, welcome to the show, yo.
What's up?
It's really good to talk with you. I am excited because just before we went live, we kind of talked about switching up the topic of what we're going to talk about. You have two businesses, and we're going to cover kind of what each of those businesses are. We're also going to talk about maintenance plans and some things like that. But I think the overall arching topic that you and I decided to go with is how to focus on your strengths. And I think that's a really valuable topic for all of us web designers, because sometimes we can get wrapped up into doing all these different tasks that we're not really built or suited for or even want to do. So really excited to talk about that. Before we do, though, can you just kind of summarize your story and how you got into web design? Because I actually don't know how you started Sweet Tea and how you got into web design.
Well, I I started school. I wanted to be an artist, and I didn't want to be a starving artist. So I thought I would teach art. I had an art teacher in elementary school that really impacted me. So I thought I'll do that. And then I tried that, and it was not a fit. And so I thought, well, what other kind of non-starving artist could I be? And back then, graphic design was always called commercial art, which makes me sound old, but so I started learning commercial art, and I thought, well, what am I going to design? I want to stand out. And this was the late 90s, and which is shocking, but it was like the internet was new. And I was like, maybe I'll design web pages, And so, but I was like, well, if I'm going to design them, I got to figure out how they work. So I took one HTML class, and I'm in this class, and my very first hello world went up on the screen in front of, I was like, this is awesome. Like I freaked out. I loved it so much. So I just went boom, 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 like straight into that. And that's what I wanted to do. And I still love design and I still love things, but I didn't have a lot of confidence. So I didn't ever really hook on. I did a million things in between then and now, but I really like, that's what I started doing, freelancing, and I got one job after another doing other things, but I have always had at least a side hustle. And then in 2016, late 2015, early 2016, I started Sweet Tea, which is my marketing company, web and branding and things like that. And so I've been going on that. That's been my web platform. And then, as you know, I've then branched off a side business with the maintenance stuff called Focus WP.
Gotcha. So when you started Sweet Tea, which is enjoysweettea.com for anyone who's interested, had you been using WordPress and Divi around that time, or did that start out? I'm just curious, like, did it start out with, because if you started designing in early 2000s or whatever, you're doing hand coding stuff. I mean, when did you get into WordPress and Divi?
Dreamweaver and all that business at the beginning, of course. And then I used Joomla for a long time. I had a job that had that was Joomla. Ugh, it's the worst. I was
gonna say, you poor thing.
I know. So I used Joomla for a good bit. Drupal. Does anybody remember Drupal was another one?
I had one experience with Drupal and it was not fun. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. And then I eventually got into WordPress and pretty early days of WordPress. I don't remember the exact year. All those CMSs sort of overlapped for me. I was learning them sort of all around the same time. And then I was building websites. I was doing some, freelancing and just, side hustle kind of stuff. And I stumbled on, I was buying templates, like we do, right? You buy a template and then you got to learn it. And I said, this is nuts. It's taken me way too much time. So I found Elegant Themes and they had all of those templates. This was pre-Divi. And I thought, well, at least they'll all be built the same. So I subscribed to them. And then Divi came out and I was like, oh my God, forget all these other ones, So I think there's still a client who refuses to update her site that's on one of their original templates. It was like a friend of mine, this tiny little thing. But anyway, yeah. So I just sort of lucked into that and stumbled on Divi day one. So.
Gotcha. That's so funny because I think everyone has that story where, all Divi users or most WordPress users nowadays were buying themes on ThemeForest or whatever, and now most people are using Divi or a different builder or something like that to where, one theme kind of rules them all. Right. Okay, so I really would just want to get right into our topic of focusing on your strength because I know you're really passionate about that. And so you were doing Enjoy Sweet Tea. Before we talk about how you started Focus WP, which is your white label maintenance website and business, what were your strengths when you started Sweet Tea?
Well, what I thought were my strengths and what are my strengths have sort of maybe not always been accurate. But when I started Sweet Tea, it's actually a perfect question for this topic because I've always sort of been a lone wolf. Even when I had a full-time job as a web developer, I was the whole department. Like my boss was an executive assistant I worked at a university. I worked at Georgia Tech. And so I was even there a lone wolf. And then when you freelance, you do the design and the development and all this stuff, copywriting when it needs it, everything. So I got a freelance job working for this web shop in Charlotte where I live. And the creative director there, he was designing and I was building. And it was like, it was amazing. It was like the work was so much better. He had been doing the same thing, lone wolfing it. And, he pretty much sucked at building websites, but he was a great designer. And so when we teamed up, it was like our work was so much better than either of us could do alone. So that was one of my first things where I started to realize like, okay, if I have somebody else doing the design, my development work is better. So it sort of started to sink in a little bit, like this refinement of who I was. And so
Gotcha.
we worked together, and then I forget which one of us was like, do you want to do another side project with me? And we were like, yes, oh my God. So we started doing work just out of the gate, boom, all of a sudden we had checks in our hand and we didn't have anywhere to put them. We're like, I guess we should start a company. So that's how Sweet Tea came about. So that it was all sort of because of that, sort of starting to recognize strengths and things.
Okay. What's behind the name with Sweet Tea? Is it because you're in North Carolina, right?
Yeah. I it's just silly. Like, I think you've talked about it before too, right? With your in transit. It's like, it doesn't really matter. So we were in this urgent situation. Like, we couldn't get a bank account until we had an LLC. Well, we couldn't get an LLC until we had a name, and we couldn't get a name. So we figured out our URL, because you never know. Like, so we had, it's this whole thing of like all these steps you have to take to go into the bank for 5 minutes and open a bank account, So we were in such a hurry. And so I said, okay, well, listen, we're going to think about it ahead of time. We're going to get together and we're going to brainstorm for one afternoon. And that is it. We're going to come up with something, because I could overthink a thing for years. Like, I could obsess and obsess.
Every web designer's struggle, right?
And I'm very much a analysis paralysis kind of person. So I'll think through everything. So I basically came to that meeting with things I didn't want. My previous freelance endeavor was called 510, FIVE 10. And I'm like, if I have to freaking spell something again, I'm going to murder somebody. It was confusing because it was the word 5 and the number 10.
Gotcha.
I didn't want that. I had one before that had a dash in it. Image dash design. No, I'm not saying a dash. I don't want to have to spell anything. I want it to be words that people know that I can say them over the phone without ambiguity. So these were kind of my things. And he came up with the whole Sweet Tea thing because he's from Charlotte and we were going to focus on this Southern market. Everybody loves sweet tea. It's values and all this stuff too, because we've all had all those clients who's like, their web developer has run out on them, won't give them their passwords, whatever it is, like all this stuff. So we wanted to sort of be the opposite of that, integrity. And so anyway, honestly, I've never really loved the name. And it's really funny because my partner at the time, which we're not partners anymore, he's gone his own separate way, amicably, but he drinks half and half, and I'm diabetic, so I can't drink sweet tea. So neither of us even drink it, which is
funny.
Kind of silly.
That's how I would have thought it would have started. Like, you guys just love sweet tea and you wanted to make a business out of that name.
We're not just that big of fans of a beverage, no.
Well, you hit on two really important points there, I think. One was a name that is easily found and that you don't have to type in differently, because like a number is very tough. Yeah, if they have to typing in a number versus the word of the number is completely different. And
sometimes people type sweat tea, which I don't care for, but
yeah.
Yeah,
it's memorable though. Even like when I met you a couple years ago and I was trying to think back to your site, I remember Sweet Tea. It was just a very easily, memorable name. But to your point, yeah, a name really doesn't matter. I mean, unless it's just an absolutely terrible name or is tough to type or something like that. Like,
I always say, if Kodak and Xerox can become the behemoths that they became with, those are made up words. They're not even real words.
And I mean, half of my clients don't even know my business name. They're like, Josh, our web design guy or whatever,
Right.
So yeah, that's
to
really
be
interesting.
fair, you do put your name on a lot of things though.
I do now. Well, yeah, I do with joshhall.co, but In Transit Studios, like,
I know, I'm just
it's a valid point though. So going back to your strengths with Sweet Tea, do you think your strengths were more like the vision side of things, and then some of the more like business owner end of things, or did you enjoy the design and development? Or what did you enjoy when you started?
Part of my problem is I enjoy a lot of things. I love personality tests. I love all those things where you try and identify, and define yourself a little bit, but I never can remember which ones I am. Like, I don't, INF, whatever. All I know is every one of those tests that I take, whatever the gregarious outgoing one is, I'm 100. Like, I'm the max on that. And the other ones I sort of am balanced. And I just sort of figured everybody had like a thing they were all the way on. And I've sort of realized down the road that like a lot of people are more balanced than me. But I have this extreme part of my personality where I'm a true extrovert. So I get fueled and energized from interactions with people. Like, I'll be wound up after this podcast just from like blabbing with you, or, or if, I went to some conferences last week, WordCamp US, and and another one. And it's like everybody else is like exhausted afterward. And it just fires me up. I have a blast.
That's funny. Same here, because I'm the same way. I am very much an extrovert to where people energize me and fill me up. My wife is the complete opposite. If we hang out with somebody on Friday night, Saturday, we better have a day at home because she is like worn
She's done
out. Yeah.
And I'm always like, let's keep going. Yeah. So, but anyway, so when it comes to certain things like sitting down and being able to, and I'm kind of an ADD, like all these things that I would try to kind of fight and jam myself into like, no, I'm supposed to like be this. I should get up and start working at 8 a.m. and work my 8 hours and do, and I'm like, I don't know. Why did I feel like that? Like, why did I think that's a thing? And I think a lot of people sort of feel like there's something that we should be, but that's not me. My brain doesn't work really before noon very well. Late 2 a.m, you can't imagine the ideas I come up with, right? When everybody else is done. And so I thought, well, I need to work with my strengths instead of fighting it. So sit down and do the bookkeeping and the billing. It's terrible for me because it's so detailed and focused. To sit down and do like a bunch of coding and programming, it's not going to be my strength. It's going to take me way too long to do it. So I kind of had to come to these terms, and I've just sort of recognized like I can design some stuff, but I'm not the best designer. There's lots of people that are way better than me. I can build a website, but there's lots of people that are way better and faster than me. So what I can do is I can talk. I can run my mouth, and I understand all of these things enough to run a team. I understand them to use freelancers and contractors. So I could say like, I know about how long that should take. I know like what's involved in it, and I know how it should look when it's done. I know how to plan a website because I know what the capabilities are. These kind of things that I started to realize I can speak to a client and translate geek speak. I can do those kind of things. So, at some point I really wanted to build the sites myself because I am a geek and I do love it. And I wanted to hire somebody to do sales. And I've done a complete 180 from that at this point, where now I've realized like that was not my strength. That was something that I felt I should do or wanted to do, but it wasn't my strength. I do much, much better when I'm, on camera doing podcasts or tutorials or sales calls or networking meetings or all of these things, because that's my personality type. So that's, that's sort of the metamorphosis that I've taken over the past few years.
Gotcha. Well, very well said. That's really interesting. I think you hit on a number of really important things. I think being self-aware of your strengths and then listening to your gut as far as like it sounds like, yeah, because it's funny hearing you talk. I almost like, it's like an echo of how I feel and what I've experienced the past few years too. It's
That's
like,
awesome.
I enjoy designing and I love CSS and I could do some more coding, but I don't. Well, I should say I like CSS. I'm not going to say I absolutely love CSS, because especially now that I'm doing teaching and podcasting and everything else, like these are the things, to your point, that I'm best at. Like there are coders that are way better than me at CSS and PHP and even design. And I'm like, you know what it would take me to do something in a certain code is probably going to take someone else like half the time. But the areas of my business with, to your point, like the sales, the networking, the vision casting, and then even with my Josh Hall and .co endeavor, like these are things that fire me up more than those other tasks. So to be able to get those tasks filled up quickly, or at least hiring those out with subcontractors, I think that's a very valuable mindset that most people don't have. And I think one thing that's interesting about both of us is that we have the background of design and development. So we can, to your point, speak that geek language, but because a lot of people, like if somebody gets into web design and they just want to do sales and marketing, but they don't know the tools, that's a very, very dangerous position because they have no idea how to code a project. They might say, oh yeah, we can do that for $2,000 when you talk to the designer and developer and they're like, oh, this should be like $5,000 at least. So I think that's a very valuable thing. I think that's something that people can take away from is, figure out what areas of a web design business that you like and that you're good at and you have expertise in, or that you want to get better at, and focus on that and then share the load with other people who are better at those tasks.
Right. So it's not recognizing weaknesses, it's recognizing strengths. So you can say like, you're not, that is like a perfect example, right? You're not the best programmer or whatever, but you know, look at the strength that that provides you because you have dabbled in it. That is an amazing strength to be able to understand all the bits and pieces that go into these projects, to be able to quote them, to be able to teach them, to do all that kind of stuff, you know? Like, so it really is about finding like, what is your, and it's not like, oh, what am I good at? It's what is your personal strength? Like, what is
Yeah.
your personality and your brain type? Like, what direction do those lead you in?
And that's a really good point too, because one thing I talk about in my business course that I just released is that there are like all kinds of roles when you start a web
Mhm.
design business, and when you're the freelancer, you are in every role. You are like basically,
Right.
I kind of say there's about 9 or 10 main roles. There's the CEO, the head honcho, as I like to call it. There's the creative director, project manager, salesperson, marketing, designer, developer, support, tech, stuff like that. And there's
Accounting.
accounting. There's all these roles, and I think it's good to get a versatile knowledge of each one. At least
Mhm.
dip your toes into each role, and then you'll quickly realize what you're good at and what you hate. To your point, I'm the
Mhm.
exact same way. I cannot stand the accounting and the numbers end of business. That is not my strength. I am not. I am a detailed person, but I am not a bean counter. And
Mhm.
that's the area where like I hire my CPA does all that. They have my books and everything. Like I just work with them. I don't even want to touch that stuff. I want to focus on creating content and doing what I love, and more importantly, what I do best. And that fills me up,
Yeah.
because if I had to do number counting all day, I'm going to be miserable. But if I get to do podcasts and teach people and help people, that's what fires me
It's
up.
awesome, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So really, really interesting. Let's talk about, so you found your, I was going to say your niche, but you found, what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. And sounds like you scaled to where, you focused on the roles that you enjoy and you're good at with Sweet Tea. Since we're talking about focusing on our strengths, let's talk about Focus WP. That was a nice segue,
Hey, I love it.
because that the birthplace of that was at WordCamp US in 2017, right? When you met
Yeah,
Tom,
2
your
years
partner
ago.
with that. Because
Yeah.
that's when I met you. I met you and Tom. And yeah, tell us about that. Tell us about how that all came about. Maybe we can transition into this conversation in regards to Focus WP.
Yeah, so, at the time, I don't know why, but a lot of people were talking about maintenance at the time, WordPress maintenance, and kinda grumbling about like, it was this sort of thorn in everybody's side, and I was always like, "You guys are crazy, I love maintenance, it's so
Yes.
easy and it's so profitable, like, I love it."
Yes.
And everybody just thought I was nuts, but I had put this whole system in place with my company, Sweet Tea. So I had done all the research and everything, put managed WP in place, hired a couple people to work to do the updates for me and send the reports and do all this stuff. So I had this little machine running, just making me money, and I freaking loved it. And so I met Tom, and he and I were conference buddies that year, and we were just kicking it during, between sessions or something. And I was just talking about this and I was just fired up about it. And he just listened quietly because he's a different personality type than me. And he, like I don't know if it was a week or two later, he sends me a message and says, like, I just sent you a long email. Don't freak out. And I went and he sent me a business plan. Like he sent me this mile long email that had all these details worked out. And he was like, "Do you want to start a business?" And I was like, "Yes," like immediately, yes. And he's like, "You don't need
And
to think." I'm like, "No, I want like because again, this is like the pairing of these strengths, right?" So I'm the dreamer. I'm an inventor, a dreamer, and nothing I've ever invented will ever see the light of day. But that's what they always say, right? Like the any invention that you see, the person who's credited with it is just the person who got it to market. Have you heard that?
oh, that's good.
Because it's the brain type that can actually invent and create doesn't have the brain type that can do all those other bits,
The
you know?
fulfillment. I have heard that, and I think a
Right.
couple different ways I've heard that,
Yeah,
where
for
like
sure.
somebody can have the greatest idea ever, but it doesn't matter if they're not actually going to do something with it. It's whoever actually patents it and puts their name on it. That's
Exactly.
yeah.
So I'm like, I have millions of ideas all the time. I have since I was a little kid. I have this memory of my brother and I playing outside when we were like 5 and 6 or something, and him rolling his eyes and going, "Not another invention." Like that's just been me my whole life. But
Mm.
so, but Tom is very detailed, and he can like see all the business elements that I don't see. I just see like, hey, this is cool, and he made it a business. And so we put all of the pieces in place, and he's great with the automation and the this and the that. And I'm like, okay, I'll talk about it on a podcast, or I'll make training videos. And I'm like, do you want to do it? And he's like, heck no. Like, he doesn't want any parts of any of that. And so this has sort of like been such a perfect, we crack up all the time at like, we are complete opposites, and we are like the yin and yang for business. Like, it's perfect. So it's even bled into our other businesses, because he runs Anchored Media, which is a web studio. He uses Divi as well, and Sweet Tea. So sometimes he'll jump on and help me with some of the tedium of things. And
Awesome.
I made a sales call for him yesterday because he doesn't like talking on the phone. You know, so it's like we are both on
balance,
this,
right?
Exactly. Like I don't know how to say it right, because it's not filling in for someone else's weaknesses. It's just our strengths complement each other.
Yeah. And you find that with relationships too. I think that's super important in business, but also in like marriage and just relationships in general with friends or family. Like I said, my wife is pretty opposite of me on the spectrum of being like, she's social, and she likes people, and she's really fun to hang out with if you're in a party.
She is. I've hung out with her.
Yeah, you've met her. Super nice. But I'll tell you right now, like after we left word camp, she's like, oh, I am done. Like, it was cool meeting everybody, but tomorrow I'm just ready to not do anything. Like,
and you're like, I got so many ideas now.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm ready to go back. I'm so pumped. But even other things we found, like I'm more of a risk taker. I'm not a numbers detail oriented person, where she is more of the kind of bean counter. And what's interesting, so you said you like personality tests. One thing I'm big on is DISC. Have you ever taken like a DISC test? So
I've done them all. I do them all, and I can never remember what I always have to go like look them back.
I can tell you right now, you're a high I. So, and I actually talk about this in my business course as well, because this is super important for your team, but also with clients, because you can figure out what type of personality type your clients are and how to work with them. But for those who aren't familiar, DISC is basically a personality test platform to where, and there's different levels of testing. You can do basic tests, or you can do really advanced ones. I did an advanced one through some coaching program I did a couple years ago. But there's different terms, and like for the letters DISC, it's DISC. And the way I like to explain it is that D stands for more dominant type, like a personality type. I is more interactive, which you and I definitely are. We're very high I's. S is more like a steady personality, and then C's are more cautious. And then sometimes if you have two people who are married, for example, that are high D's, like two really dominant personalities, that's where fights and clash, there's going to be some tense moments. Where if you have like two C's together, they're both really cautious, you're probably never going to get anything done or never invest in anything. So like if you have a high D and a high I paired with an S and a C, sometimes that makes a really good combo. And that's kind of the way my wife is. Like, she complements my strengths, to your point. Just because it's not a weakness that I'm not like that. That's not the way I'm wired.
Exactly. It's not a weakness, but like, I don't know how to refer to it, but yeah, it's just, so there's this word complement. There's two spellings of it, and it's not compliment like, hey, you look lovely today, Josh, but it's got an E in the middle, and it's like compliment with an E, and it means to complete. And that's really the word. You have to find someone who is your complement in that way. It's not I don't even know. But anyway, so it's just interesting to me too, to think about even that little word that means like to complete somebody, like somebody who is your complement. So Emily's your complement. She's the right match for you.
That's really great. Yeah, because if I was with somebody who was a high I and a high D, she is a little more D. She's very dominant and direct in some areas, but she's more cautious. So she's more of a D and a C, to where she's a little more direct in more areas than I am, but she's also a little more cautious and reserved in some areas, where I'm interactive and steady. Those are so we literally like complement each other through and through. And yeah, to your point, like from a business partnership perspective, like you probably wouldn't do well with somebody who is just like you in a business, because you guys are both going to go a million miles an hour. You kind of need somebody to reel you in. The
creative that I was partnered with before that I'm no longer partnered with.
Was that the problem?
Part of it. I mean, not entirely. Life stuff, but really, like the business wouldn't have grown the same with somebody like that compared to somebody who is a lot more detailed. I mean, he's an artist, so he was a broad strokes kind of guy. He didn't like the details. He never cared one single bit about the bank account, that kind of thing. So I would do it by default, but I hated that stuff too. So, it was just like we were too lopsided on one side of the spectrum. Even though we made some cool projects together, it was,
Yeah.
business wise, it wasn't the greatest fit. But then that like circles you back around to, for the people that are listening, they could be like, okay, yeah, that's great. So how do I do that? Right? That's the trick. There's no simple answer except for maybe to at least be self-aware and be on the lookout for opportunities, like.
Yeah. And I think it's probably worth talking about the importance of going to meetings, word camps, Divi meetups, which are becoming more and more popular. Those kind of situations where even if you are an introvert and you're, being in social situations are really tough. Cause I recognize that a lot of designers and developers are that way.
Yeah.
To where going to a networking group sounds like the worst thing in the world. I totally understand that. But the cool thing about going to a WordCamp or particularly a Divi meetup is you're with your tribe. Like I spoke at a Divi meetup a couple months ago, and there were a few people who you could tell were like more like us, the extroverts, and could be really good at sales and stuff like that. But at least half of the group was very like, I would prefer to be working on a site than, meeting people. So I can understand that. And I think that's a really good point. You want to be very self-aware of where your strengths are. But I say that to say, get to a WordCamp, get to a Divi meetup around you. If there's not one around you scheduled, you can start one and you'll make some amazing relationships because and it sounded like it was a little bit unintentional. Like you were just talking with Tom and then obviously something you said made him think like, holy crap, we could make a really cool, profitable, recurring income business out of this because I feel the same way. I love website maintenance. And that's why I have my first course was built off that. I mean, it changed me and my family's life. So to that point, I say do your website maintenance plan. However, if it's just something you don't want to handle, that's where your guys' business comes in with Focus WP.
If you want to learn how to do maintenance, call Josh. If you don't want to do maintenance, call me.
That's perfect. Well said. Well said. But I mean, the point of it's really interesting and Tom must have kind of seen the strengths in you that paired with him, right? Because he technically could have started that business, but I imagine maybe he met you and was like, you know what, this is... Maybe he didn't even intentionally think about this, but he probably realized this is somebody who complements the areas that I don't either want to do or I'm not best at with the sales and being the face of the business and that kind of thing. Would you say he kind of heard that and then that's what kind of lit the fire for him to take the next
I don't know.
level?
You'd have to ask him, but you'll never get a chance because he ain't coming on a podcast.
I'll just have to send him an email, not expect a podcast.
You have to email it's fun. Yeah. But I think another little element to all of this too, that I sort of, this was another sort of part of me that changed a bit. And I thank the Divi community for this actually. And that is being pretty much an open book and being transparent. And I sort of, when I started doing web things, I would, I figured out a couple cool things and I wanted to show them off, but not let anybody know how I did them. And
gotcha.
The early Divi community, the early Divi groups and stuff like that, Gino Quiros, he was one of the ones that really out of the gate just gave everything away. And he would do all these, these cool things and he'd just throw the code right in a message or something. And I think that took a shift with the community. And I mean, to this day, people largely love the Divi community. It's so big now that you have, of course, struggles and things in some of the groups, but for the most part, it's a very helpful and warm community. And I think that whole mentality that changed me. And I realized it doesn't help anything to keep stuff in. And by giving things away, it only just shows people what you're capable of. It's, the people who don't want to do it will hire you anyway. If they're going to figure it out, they weren't going to hire you in the first place. And it just, it's just the community and giving. So if you go into these groups and you give and you just show your true colors and you don't try and be something that you're not, back again to that self-awareness bit, then it really does come back to you. So, Tom and I were sitting having that conversation. I told him everything. I told him what I had the girls do. I told him what I charged. I told him what I paid. I just was spilling it. I'm like, this is cool. You should try it, and look, then he came back to me with a business idea and now we're partners. So, it feels like maybe you should hold on to something proprietary, but really, if you just give it, then, and that's, for those of you guys that are introverts or more shy, you can still give things on the internet, like you can share things that, something that I tell people like in my group and other places, people that have these struggles as they're starting out. I'm like, you don't realize how much you know. All the people listening here, if you're insecure and you don't know where your next client is, or you feel like you're not good enough, like think about who your family calls when they have trouble with any gadget. When anybody's printer breaks, who do they call? You, right? Because you know things that people don't know and that they wish they did know. So give it away, help people and give back. And then it's like, stuff just starts to shift. I mean, I don't want to get all karma and woo woo, but it's like,
no, it's totally
don't you
true.
agree, Josh?
I mean, what we're doing right now is literally like the prime example. Because when I got into the Divi community, first off, I didn't even know there was Facebook groups. I joined a couple and then I didn't realize how many there were. So I started mine, the Divi Web Designers Facebook group, which is almost 20,000 members at this point, 3 years later. And
that's amazing.
I did the same thing. Yeah, that's wild. And that
my group just hit 145.
Well, but your group, the focus on your biz that's kind of the primary word here. Focus that's more like business oriented. And honestly, it's probably better that group stays a little smaller because if you get that's because mine's really more of a support group than anything.
Yeah. I'm just teasing. I love my 145 little friends.
145 members with high engagement is much better than a large group with no engagement. But to that point, like I did those exact same things. I just started giving, which that's my personality too. I'm very transparent about everything. And that's kind of one area that my wife and I differ too. I'm like cool with talking about money. Like I'll talk about money and figures and everything. She's a little more reserved like that. She kind of feels weird about talking about money and that shouldn't be talked about. So like, for me with the Divi community, when I got started, I started doing tutorials. And before the Divi community, I was just doing mentoring here locally to high school kids and stuff. And I was like, hey, here's how much I made this year. You could go work at McDonald's and make $500 this summer, or you could learn how to build websites and you can make $5,000 this summer, So
that's
they were
awesome.
like, oh, like that's kind of what got me started with the teaching and everything. And so I was really happy to give a lot of information, and it's come back to me tenfold. Like now I have a 6-figure course business with joshhall.co, and it's amazing. Now I didn't make that initially, partly because I gave a bunch of information for free and I didn't really have any products or anything. So I was just giving. And then I eventually, once my audience was built to a bigger size, that's when I kind of started.
That's the thing. You wouldn't have made money if you hadn't built your audience first.
Exactly. Yeah,
so
exactly.
You had to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point, like you just never know what doors are going to open when you're generous. And I think that goes through a lot of areas, even just being personally financial or gift oriented and giving oriented. Like I'm really big on giving to charities and nonprofits that you respect and care about. Like there's a lot that is said about both the business and personal life as far as where that will come back. But
and if you're starting out and you don't have, like, give $5.
Yeah. Yeah. If you
give
make
$10 or something, like to NPR or to whoever it is that you like, whatever. There's a local Charlotte like news list that has great emails, and they just sent around a thing today, and I'm like, heck yeah, I got to give you a few bucks, because it's like, so. But even if you don't have a lot, just like you're saying, like just give, and it's amazing.
It's interesting on a personal level. I like over the past couple years, anytime I go to the grocery store and they ask if you want to like round up for Children's Hospital or something like that, I always say yes. And I found that just that act of like being very giving in nature has just completely not only changed my mind, but just how I am as a person. And it's definitely bled over into business as well. So that's a really interesting.
I always say no to that, and now I feel like a jerk. I never even pay attention really to who they're saying. Like I'm just like, nah.
Yeah.
And the other day, I felt like especially a jerk, because it was like, your total's $81.97. Do you want to round up? And I'm like, nope.
$81.99.
It's my 3 pennies.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I don't say that to be like boastful or whatever. I just
I don't think it is.
That really has kind of changed. I'm much more giving now, and I think it's important to have that mindset before a certain amount of success comes, because you don't want to be that wealthy person who hangs on to every penny, and that's that's a dangerous place to be in. Which, speaking of what success looks like, we talked recently about the word success because you told me, I talk about success in web design. And while, yes, I'd say 6-figure web design business, and I use success as a term of, providing for a family or whatever, there are different forms of success, and I'm completely fine with that. I talked with a podcast coming out, or it's probably already going to be out by the time this is out, but I talked with Noelle Steegs, who is a digital nomad, and success for her is way different than success for me monetarily because she's not supporting a wife and 2 kids and a hungry golden retriever, so success looks different. But yeah, talk about that. Like, what do you think about the word success and what that looks like?
Well, I think it goes back all to this same thing of like knowing who you are and what are your goals. Because there are, stigmas and there are established things, just like what I was saying before about like, oh, you should work these hours and these days and blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, so a successful business means what? You make a lot of money or you do this, that, but does it, do you need a lot of money? I don't know. Maybe you don't. For me, so I sat down and thought like, what do I want from this? What do I want from my own business? And I want to have the flexibility to have my own schedule and to work when I work best. Because I've had that full-time job I had, I straight up went to my boss and said like, listen, if you want me to be creative, why don't you let me come in at 10? Because if you don't, I'll still come in at 8:30, but I'm going to sit and surf Facebook until my brain turns on. And she went, just show up at 8:30 tomorrow. She didn't even care. Wow. And I'm like, I don't want to sit at a desk. I don't want to be paid because my butt is in a seat. Like that is like torture to me. So I want to be in control of my own destiny. I want to be able to work when I work best and all of those kind of things. That's part of the success to me, that I can do that. I want to, and I had an opportunity last month. A friend called me and said they were going on this epic vacation to Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji, and someone backed out, and there were open seats available for a fraction of the price.
I wondered how that worked out.
But we had to leave in 1 week. It was a week away, and I said, "I'm going." I went, and it was amazing. It was an incredible adventure. But if I worked for a company, could I have taken 2.5 weeks off with 1 week notice? So to me, that is a part of the success that I feel. So that's a big one for me. I also, I want to be able to take care of my family, and I want to be able to, my folks are great right now, but when they're not, I want to be able to take care of them. So I have goals like that, which are financial and schedule, so there's just all these different things. Like I don't have, I don't have babies and things like that either, like you do, which is a whole nother level of pressure to provide for them, but I just think to not get tied up into what somebody else's definition of success is what's important.
Yeah. And I think that's really hard for people who have families who are really big on like, if you're not a lawyer or a doctor, I'm not proud of you kind of thing, which I think it's a little bit different now as a whole with all different societies and cultures. But I know there are still certain cultures and a lot of families out there still who will only to be honest, a lot of my family, like my extended, not my mom or my dad, because they were both very supportive with all endeavors from being in a rock band to starting the business. But I had family members who...
They're probably thrilled.
Yeah, they're cool now because now I can show them like, hey, come on. They see we live in a nice house and everything. And it's like, oh, great, he did all right. But I remember growing up, like even into my mid-20s, probably mid to late, even late 20s. Like I know a lot of people, I felt very looked down because I didn't have a 4-year degree and I didn't go to a traditional path. And I just wasn't like everyone. And a lot of my extended family is all about security and stability. And you're probably wired like me, like that's not as important to me as freedom. I would much rather have freedom and then miss mortgage 1 month or pay it late than have to be stuck in a job where I'm stuck to a salary. And luckily I haven't, missed a mortgage in a very long time, but that's the trade-off. But you do that's one thing I talk about in my course as well, as I talk about like, what are you okay with handling, like worst case scenario? I remember I talked about this with Anya in episode 3. We talked about like, okay, what's the worst that could happen? And this, like, if your clients dry up and business is slow for a while, like if you miss your mortgage, or God forbid you can't pay rent, or you have to move back with your parents, like if you're okay with the worst case scenario, yeah, it would suck. You'd have to swallow some pride. But on the opposite end, the freedom of being able to do what you want, when you want, for you, that's amazing. The sky is the limit when it comes to what you can earn in web design when you have a freelance business, because you're not tied to a $50,000 salary or something. You could easily, I don't want to say easily, but you could make six figures.
It's totally possible to go over that. Yeah,
totally possible. Yeah. With potentially less work than what it would take, in a salary position. And, there's so many things like that I think are really important to talk about when it comes to the term success, because like what, and success often is thought about like money wise, but yeah, if you have a lifestyle you really enjoy and you have the freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do, then that's success.
It is.
Yeah. And it's interesting.
Cheers to success.
Cheers to success. Yeah. Cause it looks different for everybody for sure. And I think most web designers get that, but I think people in the corporate world, maybe it's a little bit of a more struggle, and people who go from the corporate world to freelance, it's the Wild West. It's completely different as far as
I know it really is.
Look
it's
like
tough.
that, and and there's I don't know. I love it though. It's one reason I'm passionate about doing this podcast and getting people more plugged into the web design. So with like Focus WP, you guys are doing white label WordPress maintenance. So just like you said earlier, if you want to learn how to build website maintenance plans, which you and I both love, that's where my course comes in.
Which is awesome. I've taken Josh's course. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I was going to say, I had you and Tom go through it to help out as you guys were doing the white label stuff. And that's one cool thing about the Divi community too, is like you can go through similar courses even if you already know a subject, and you can get so many golden gems, because like I had a different experience with website and maintenance and how I do things with how you guys do it. So like there's so many great things about that as far as, going through a course that you may already know a little bit about, or maybe already have some interest in. But again, like with your white label services, if you don't want to do maintenance, that's where they can hand it off to you. And what's your vision with Focus WP? I mean, you guys have been doing it for about a year and a half now, or maybe just over a year?
Yeah, really like full force about a year, because it took us a little bit to get up and running with our other businesses and stuff. But so the design work and the marketing work, the web, all that was Sweet Tea. That's a little bit more like my baby, like we've talked about before, or I think you've talked about with others on the podcast too. It's like you care so much about every detail. I love Focus WP and I care a lot about it, but that's almost like a business that I want to have every single thing automated. And it's a business that I could almost see, like I want to build it so that if the time ever came, I could sell it. Like I want to build it like a turnkey system that could be sold. I'm not saying I want to do that or anything. Don't freak out, Tom, if you're listening. But, no, he knows. But I like, that's sort of the structure of that business. And I like the idea of it being automated and recurring revenue. Mm-hmm. And so while I do a lot of custom work in my other business, this is like this. I have, there's like one product, 3 levels. The price is set. You get that. This is what you get. You could sign up on the website. It puts you through a automation that you get all the emails, and we collect all the things we need. We do like a kickoff call, and boom, you're done. You're set up. You're running.
It's awesome.
You get your thing every week, every month, your report. Like that whole thing. So it's a different animal. I love them both, but they're very different businesses.
Yeah. And it's cool though that they work together. And that's one thing I love about web design. You can have different businesses or different sub-services that work with either under the same entity or maybe a whole different website in general, which is really cool. Cause you could have, you have your Sweet Tea maintenance plan, but that was basically used as the framework to do Focus WP, a complete white label side business that, you and Tom could absolutely build up to sell one day, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. So like we're talking about focusing on strengths and being successful. And it sounds like for you, very similarly, you obviously care more about freedom and obviously finances are big with it. Like you want to make enough to have the life you want to sustain and live and help your folks out one day and stuff like that. But do you almost... Like, I guess my question right now is, how do you balance those two? The good thing is it sounds like Focus WP is pretty, like, not that time intensive if it's more automated. But did you have a point where it was tough managing both? Because that's obviously, I'm going through that to where I'm running my web design business. I'm not doing any of the design now, but running that and doing my joshhall.co stuff with courses and tutorials and now podcasts, it's certainly been a head first dive into like how to balance things effectively.
Yeah.
How did you learn to balance that when you started a second business?
I'm not sure I have learned yet, honestly. Time management is not one of my strengths. And that's something that, unfortunately, as a business owner, you don't really have the luxury of handing off to somebody. Like there's no, like you just have to keep working at it. So I was really, there was a couple times there where it was really stressful because there was a lot to be done. And I actually had a business coach at the time for Sweet Tea. I was getting some coaching, and he, like, I stopped telling him about things with focus because he said you can't do two things successfully. That was his thing, and my side of it was, well, I don't have a choice because I can't give up these clients. I can't neglect my clients because that's my bread and butter. But this ship is sailing. Like Tom is going with this bit. Like if I don't be a part of it, I'll just miss out. So that was a tough one, but that's the other, like, that's sort of the part of the thing with the freedom. We talk a lot about how much freedom we have, but it's not the same kind of, it's not like not working is freedom. It's not like you're on vacation. The freedom is that you are in control, but sometimes that means you work a lot more than you would if you're working a 9-to-5 job.
I'm glad you said that. That's a really good point because freedom itself is a whole different term that, it's relative.
Freedom is not free time.
Yes. Yeah. It's not like I just wake up every day and do whatever I want and never work. Yeah. It's just that,
right.
Yeah. To your point, like I work in segments around my life. I don't if I have never missed one of my daughter's visits at Children's Hospital here in Columbus. Like that for me was very important. And if I was in a corporate job, of course, no way I could have done that.
Right.
But I have had to do work on evenings and sometimes on the weekends
and all
because
that stuff,
and I have.
And I just took that awesome vacation, but I can't remember the last time I took a week-long vacation, in the 10 years, 7 years, maybe I think it's been since before that. So, it's a different, it's a specific use of the word freedom.
Yeah. And to your point though, like with cause it's so funny you said that. Cause when I went through a business coaching program a couple years ago, he said the same thing to me. He was like, this endeavor, I was new in with the joshhall.co stuff. I had just started putting out a few layouts, which are so low cost. I don't even market them or anything now because my focus is courses. But he was like, this is like costing you a lot of money with time and stuff. But I was just so dang passionate about it. And I also knew the potential. Like I knew, maybe I didn't articulate like how big it could become because you talk about sky is the limit. Web design, you're a little more limited because service work is all about time and how fast you can get things done. Or if you have a team, like there's a lot more to it. Whereas with things that are more recurring, like with Focus WP, what you guys have going on, you could scale that very easily. For me with courses, if 100 people buy a course, I'm not spending any more time other than just answering a few more emails or stuff like that. It's not service work. So it's selling a product or something over and over and over and over again. So there's no limit to that. It's much easier to scale. So I say that to say my business coach was the same way. It was like, this is, if you're going to do this, it's costing you a lot. And yes, it was very costly in the first year, but within 2 years, because I started joshhall.co 2 years ago, just a couple months ago. And in 2 years, I built a 6-figure business with that, whereas it took me several years. It's so cool. I just love it. But to your point, like I had paid my dues. I have worked my freaking butt off to get to this point. But like I say that to say within Transit Studios, my web design business, that took, I think 5 years before. Well, I think it was more like 4.5 years before I got to that 6-figure point. And it was still much more time and service intensive. So I think that's a really important thing to remember with side endeavors. And the cool thing about that, for anyone who wants to have some sort of side endeavor that they think has some potential, the biggest thing is to make sure you're not doing it all yourself. Like you had Tom. It'd be a whole different story if you were doing everything with Sweet Tea and with Focus WP.
It wouldn't have happened. I couldn't have
Then
done
you're going to have two half-ass efforts. You got 50% here. Yeah, and that's one important lesson, I think, in anything in life is you have 100%. If you do over 100%, you're going to burn out. So
Mhm.
where is your 100% going? Like if you're going to do 50% here and 50% here, you're going to need to have other systems in place or people to account for that other percentage that you're
Yeah,
missing, on that endeavor. So I think
totally. Yeah.
it's an interesting point that you were at there that
But there's something to be said for sure for being overworked, stressed, and run down for something that you feel passionate about, as opposed to because you have a boss telling you to punch a clock and show up
yeah.
and do something that has nothing to do with your passions or your feelings. So,
And it's also
so
when
yeah,
you're sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Steph. I
no,
was
it's
just going
fine.
to say, when you're doing something you really enjoy, even though you may work a lot more, it's different because you
It
enjoy
is.
that work. I actually call it FERK. I call it fun work. So
You're such
I
a
t-
nerd. I
I
love
tell
it.
I know, right? I tell my wife that I have different types of
Does
work.
she say,
There's
yeah,
like,
fuck you, Josh?
yeah, right. I tell her no. Sometimes I'm like if she knows I'm on my laptop or something in the evening or something, I'll be like, oh, I'm doing a little bit of FERK, which is fun work. I have LERK,
Yeah.
which is like learning work if I'm
Oh my
going through a
God.
course or something. But then, yeah, like work is like, I got some emails. I got a client has email issues going on or some domain stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's where like I could spend way less time doing in transit work, which I still really enjoy a lot of that. But my passion of doing this kind of stuff has just trumped that completely. That I'm, I probably work a lot more with joshhall.co, but it doesn't feel. I guess I say all that to say I could do half the amount of work at In Transit Studios, but it feels like double the amount of work
Yeah.
because I don't enjoy particularly the areas of support and client stuff and some of that stuff
Right.
is I've just been
All
doing
right,
it for
Josh.
so long.
So you're identifying your strengths.
Yeah.
So and
Yeah,
your
well, and
and your
that's-
preferences. So
Yeah, and that's where
it's
like
probably not one of your strengths. If you hate it, it's probably not a strength. Is another thing I'll
great
say right
point.
away.
Great point. Yeah, and it's something that you definitely want to
We
get away
like
from.
doing
And that's-
things that we're good at.
Yeah, and
Sometimes
that's
we
where
like doing things we're not good at, but if you hate doing it, I guarantee you it's not your strength.
Yeah, and that's one reason I have some contractors in place now. Like now
Yeah.
I don't do the design and the majority of the development. I do have a guy who can assist with the email problems and domain stuff. The tricky part with that is I just don't have enough of that work to bring on somebody reliably, like full.
Yeah.
So it's not really a win-win in that case. And then complete side note, but one thing I kind of learning to deal with scaling my web design business is my subcontractors in Australia, Jonathan, and a lot of my local clients want somebody to call. And I just, the time zone differences, there's a lot of things like that I'm kind of working through as I'm scaling that business.
Staffing up is no joke. That is a whole nother multi-hour podcast probably. I mean, like there's a lot that goes into all of that and a lot of headache and a lot of stress, speaking of, but man, when you have a team that is clicking and you could like stuff comes in, you delegate it and it gets done and you sit back and just see the great product turn out. Oh, isn't that like the best feeling ever?
Just a couple hours ago, I reviewed the way we do it is I get a project started. I'm the creative director and main contact. And then once I get all the questionnaires and the brief and everything together, I turn everything over to Jonathan and he does an initial site preview for me. And then I'll review it and then we'll tweak it before we show it to the client. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he showed me an initial preview today on a new site and he started on it in less than a week ago and it looks amazing. Like I've probably had 3 hours in the project so far, and we're at the point where the site is just about ready to be shown to the client. That's amazing. Like all I've had to do was...
It's a great feeling.
Yeah, I did the proposal, got the client plugged in and everything, and then now I'm turning him over to work with Jonathan. Like, yeah, once you get to that place where you have some people who can do that kind of thing, it's so freeing, and yeah, I totally agree. It's amazing.
It is. It's such a good feeling, but it doesn't come cheap. It's not just money wise, but I mean, there's a lot of stress that goes into getting, really when you're, I mean, I don't want to start going down this rabbit hole, but you almost have to start, like getting contractors and subbing things out before you're ready, if that makes any sense, like before you need it. Because if you wait until you need it to like, you can't do anything, you can't fulfill your work assignments, like, and you hire somebody that you rely on, I mean, you just can't rely on them until
and
you know them.
You have to know it's going to take some time. Like there's some time
and to get like communication down and all of that kind of stuff. And I mean, I guarantee you've had some people flake on you or do a bad job or whatever. And it's like, then it's just on you. Like you have to do it. And if you're already maxed, so there's a lot that goes into That again, though, that's a whole nother
Yeah, no,
topic.
it's so true. Well said. Well said, though. Yeah, we might need to do a round 2 on that for sure. But yeah, well, Steph, this has been a really great talk. We've covered some really cool topics. I think just the idea of focusing on your strength is so powerful with every area of life, but particularly in business. And even, I mean, one thing I encourage people is that, particularly for web designers who are just getting started, they may not be making that much. The idea of hiring out and doing a team is just overwhelming. And I've always said, like, you can do it on your own for as long as you want. I was very content for a long time with being a solopreneur, a freelancer, up until a couple of reasons. I wanted to focus on what I'm doing now with my courses and stuff. But I also got to the point where my business grew so much that I was like, I literally cannot handle it. Like I'd never forget February. I've talked about this a couple of times, but February 2018, we had 23 projects. And I was like, God. There's no way. There's no way I can do all this without it taking forever. And then I've never liked the method of like stopping work or saying I'm not available, because I always like, spacing and staggering projects to be able to get in, come in, and then work on other stuff. So in any case though, yeah, the idea of focusing on your strengths is so crucial, and that will help in every area of business.
And you don't necessarily have to bring a partner into your business, right? So you can. I mean, that's an option. If you do find somebody that's a good fit, you've got some people that they find somebody that it matches up, and they could actually, not like I did, we're starting a business, but like you can bring someone into your business, but you can also just do tiny things. I know there's a lot of people that just use like a VA. If you get a VA from a country where the dollar goes far, you can get somebody to just help you with a few small things, even a few hours a week. I mean, when I first hired someone to help me with maintenance, it was like an hour a week. And it was great. And she'd do all the things, so you don't have to like break the bank. You don't have to hire a full-time $65,000 a year employee. You could just do little bits to sort of change.
So true. And that's kind of the method I had with all my subcontractors at first. I only have one full-time subcontractor, Jonathan, who is he's basically still a subcontractor role. He's not on salary or anything, but he, I said celery there, but he,
you and your word combos, I don't know. It was like salary and hourly.
I am a little dyslexic to where I will very frequently mix words together, which is why I was apprehensive about. Yeah, like FERC. Now that one worked out pretty well.
That was on purpose, yeah.
I guarantee if you listen to numerous episodes of the podcast, you're going to hear some words mixed together, and I probably didn't even know I did it. So maybe we'll have
I haven't noticed. I've listened to them, and I haven't noticed, so that's good, yeah.
I've had some dyslexic moments for sure. But yeah, no, I say all that to say, like, yeah, I started small with subcontracting, and most of my subcontractors now are just when they're available, and then if the project needs it. And it's worked out very well.
I know, it's the best. One other little thing I wanted to say about going with your strengths, if you don't mind, is that like a couple of the things that you and I have both talked about is like, so we have certain personality types that are inherent, and we have certain brain types, the way we process things. But there are things that are in our control. So like you made a conscious decision to become more generous, and you started taking actions to do that. And I made a conscious decision to be more open and sharing and transparent and things like that. So learn your strengths, but also like society boxes us in enough. Don't box yourself in and say like, well, I'm an introvert, so I can't do that. Don't, like, if you want to change, there are things that you can do, even small things, and find new strengths,
Great point. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. I have a big issue with people who say, it's just me. It's just the way I am. I'm like, you know what? That's such bullshit, because I struggled with that growing up, and I got to a point where I'm like, you know what? That's an excuse, number one. And it doesn't matter where your past is or who you were when you grew up. Like, you can do anything. And for me, one of the big things for me was public speaking and being comfortable on camera. I really had to work at that. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'll post, even some videos from several years ago. I'm completely different on camera a few years ago. Even my first couple times I joined on Divi Chat, I was much more nervous. When I joined my networking group, I am an extrovert, but I still get butterflies talking in front of groups of people. Now I've learned to kind of use that And side note, I'm going to do a podcast episode soon with somebody who is a really good public speaker, and we're going to talk about speaking in groups in public. But one thing I've learned is to kind of channel that energy to like energy rather than nervousness.
That's good.
And yeah, because
you do your power poses before you get on.
Do the power poses. Yeah, no. But the cool thing is, and that's actually good. Like I've learned, if you're not feeling slightly nervous about something, or you don't have those anxious feelings, sometimes that means you might be bored with that, or maybe that's not something you should be into. Like I've kind of realized that with certain things I'm doing. I remember going to meetings with clients in the early days, being like kind of nervous, and you know, I'm like, oh, am I going to meet with a couple people of the company? Now I go to a meeting, I don't feel a thing, which is kind of a dangerous position to be in. It's cool because I'm cool and confident and collected, but part of me is like, I'm a little bored with that now. Like, to where this is different for me. A podcast interview is a whole different ballgame. So, but yeah. Anyway, I totally agree. I didn't mean to get off on a tangent there.
No, that's cool.
You know, just don't buy. Yeah, I think you said it. Just don't box yourself in. Don't let society put you in a thing. Don't let family tell you you're one thing if you want to be something else. Like, yeah, you can be an introvert, but you can still make really good connections. It doesn't mean you have to start an influencer brand or be on YouTube. But you can go to networking groups and you can meet people, and you know, you can take little steps that will go a long way. So
or share things on Facebook.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. And that's where I think the online communities have really blown up, is because web designers, they're happy to jump on a thread and help out. But if they go to a meetup or something, that's a whole, they're going to have to really work.
But then you get to know people in those Facebook groups. And by the time you meet them in person at the next big networking event or WordCamp or whatever it is, they're like so excited to see you because you feel like you've known each other forever, you know? So it takes the pressure off a little bit. Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah. I mean, a couple of years ago when we met at WordCamp US, and I met, Tim and David and a bunch of people with elegant themes and everything, like, we feel kind of like I already knew those people. And now you get to see them, and you get to see either how short or how tall they are, you know? There's some cool things like that. But I think it's worth bringing that point up again, to where the thought or the vision that you have of yourself sometimes is so limiting. And you can do whatever the heck you want. I know for me, like one point when I was a teenager, I basically looked at my parents' strengths, and I was like, I'm going to try to be like the best of my dad in these areas and best of my mom in these areas. And that's kind of what I've worked towards. Like,
that's adorable.
You can literally do stuff like that. So anyway, maybe we'll have to have a segment where we just have an inspirational talk, but This is good stuff.
Deep
Either way,
thoughts.
Deep thoughts with Steph and Josh, but deep thoughts with Hall and Hudson. That's what we'll go with.
There we go. I love it.
Hall and Hudson.
Sounds like a band. Right. Speaking of one last thing, fun fact to wrap it up. Do you know what you and I have in common? I know you know, but you probably forgot.
You weren't a drummer, were you?
I was.
No. Oh.
It was like forever ago. Yeah, it was a long time ago that it came up, but I had forgotten about you too, and then I heard it in one of your podcasts too.
Yeah.
We like to.
Oh yeah, that was that was my identity for so long. That was when I transitioned. It wasn't my identity,
but I really loved it.
But you loved
I still
it.
do.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I still do. I got to get my kit out of storage. And
nice. Yeah, I have my electric one set up that all my daughter and I'm sure all of her cousins are going to love here once they get big enough. But my actual drums are packed up right now just because of the season of life.
They're tough. Yeah, you can't just have those any old where.
Yeah, but no, I'm excited to fire him up one day for sure.
I know. I want to hear you play. So that'll be
well, you can search Josh Hall drum solo. It's still online.
Oh,
actually, somebody.
Is it? Okay, I'm totally
somebody on. I posted the first podcast, which was my story, and somebody found it. Somebody found my drum solo and put it on there. Yeah, there's a big correlation between musicians getting into web design. And funny enough,
really.
I think it was the same guy who posted Nick Roach had a channel of doing like acoustic singing and stuff. That is still live on YouTube. So if you really want to have a good kick, search Josh Hall drum solo and Nick Roach. Forget the song he posted.
You and Nick should start a band.
Right? We'll see if we can make that happen.
Anyway,
awesome.
This was awesome, Josh. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Do you have a final thought for anybody to kind of wrap this all up?
Oh, goodness. Divvy chatting me with the final thoughts.
I like the final thoughts because sometimes it can lead to some actionable stuff, but you've said some incredible stuff. So I'm sure there's plenty of things.
I mean, I just think focus on your strengths and don't let anybody box you in, including yourself, and define success for you, not for somebody else.
That was three good final.
Enough?
That was three final thoughts mixed in one, but I'll allow it. That was good.
Thanks.
All right, Steph, thanks for taking the time to chat. I'm sure we'll do this again.
It's fun. See you on Divvy Chat.
All right, see you soon. Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.